Is the brain fully developed at the age of 25? If you ever heard someone say your brain isn't fully developed until you're 25, this statement is often used to explain why teenagers and young adults may make risky decisions, act impulsively, or struggle with emotional control. While there is some truth behind the idea, it's not a simple scientific rule. The National Institute of Mental Health and National Institute on Drug Abuse both note that the brain continues to mature between mid-20s, especially in areas involved in judgment and self-control. The way our brain develops affects almost every part of our lives, including how we make decisions, control emotions, learn, and adapting to new experiences. Understanding brain development can help us better understand ourselves and others, especially during adolescence and early adulthood. Although many people believe the brain is fully developed at the age of 25, current research shows that the brain development is much more complex and continues to change throughout life. It changes throughout life. To understand the topic, we need to first look at how the brain works, where the age of 25 came from, and what current research tells us about brain development. The brain is one of the most complex organ in the human body, which controls our thoughts, movements, emotions, and memories and behaviors. It allows us to communicate, solve problems, make decisions, and respond to the real world around us. The brain is divided into 4 major regions called lobes. These 4 lobes work together to help us function every day. The National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Strokes explain that different parts of the brain support different functions, and the lobes are a major part of our organization. The first is the frontal lobe, which is located in the front of the brain. The frontal lobe is responsible for many higher level thinking skills, decision making, problem solving, planning, impulse control, and emotional regulation. This one is the reason researchers often focus on frontal lobe when discussing brain development. The second is the parental lobe, which helps process sensory information such as touch, temperature, and pain. It also helps with spatial awareness and understanding our surroundings. The third is the temporal lobe, which plays an important role of hearing, language, memory, and recognizing emotions. The fourth is the occipital lobe, which mainly is responsible for processing vital information, visual information, and helping us understand what we see. While our 4 lobes are important, researchers often focus on frontal lobe discussing brain development because it continues maturing much faster rather than the other parts of our brain. The National Institute of Mental Health notes that parts of the brain for developed in planning, management, and impulse control are the last to mature. The frontal lobe explains why young adults maybe still be developing skills of planning ahead, controlling emotions, and managing impulses. This does not mean that someone under the age of 25 cannot be responsible for decision making, or someone over 25 makes perfect decisions. Brain development is not an on and off switch. It's a gradual process for everyone. So where did the idea that the brain is fully developed at 25 come from? The idea became popular because of advancement in brain imagining technology. especially MRI studies. Scientists were able to observe changes in the brain over time and study how different areas develop in childhood through adulthood. Research summarized by organizations such as MIMH and MIDA shows that the prefrontal cortex continues changing during adolescence and early adulthood. These findings became especially important when studying adolescents and young adults because the period involves long major transitions such as leaving home, attending college, entering the workforce, and making independent decisions. However, over time, the phase the brain is fully developed at 25 becomes simplified. It turned into a complex scientific process into one specific age, even though developmental does not happen the same way for everyone. Research suggests that the age 25 should be viewed as a general estimate or deadline when the brain is supposed to be fully developed. Studies now understand that the brain development happens in stages, which during childhood and adolescence, the brain goes through major changes, including synaptic pruning, which is the process of strengthening quickly using connections and removing weaker ones, which helps the brain become more effective. The Harvard Center on Developing Child explains that repeated experiences help strengthen neutral connections. At the same time, myelination continues, which is basically a nerve fiber that sends signals to travel faster and more smoothly. These changes improve communications within the brain and support better thinking, learning, and self-control over time. Researchers also show that the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain developed in planning, judgment, and impulse control, is one of the last areas to mature. Even the development does not show that strictly that it stops at 25. The structural and functional changes continue into late 20s and beyond, depending on the person and the skills being measured. In addition, scientists have found that the brain development is influenced by many factors, not just age. Genetics can also affect how quickly certain brain regions mature. Environment also matters. Experience such as education, family support, stress, trauma, sleep, nutrition, and substance can all shape how the brain develops. The Harvard Center, also again on Developing Child, emphasizes that supportive relationships and positive experience can help build healthy relationship and positive experience and help build a brain architecture. While chronic stress can interfere with development, for example, chronic stress can affect areas of the brain involved in memory and emotional regulation, while learning new skills can strengthen neutral pathways and improve brain functions. Researchers also emphasize that different abilities developed at different rates. Someone may become better at reasoning or the usage of vocabulary earlier in life, while emotional regulation or long-term planning may continue improving later on. This means that there is no single moment where every part of the brain becomes finished. Why it matters. Understanding the brain development matters because it affects how we view decision-making, education, and mental health, and personal growth. First, it helps us understand decision-making. Young adults are often expected to make important decisions or choices about careers, relationships, finances, and independence. Knowing that the brain is still developing can help encourage patience, self-awareness, and thoughtful decision-making. The brain regions involved in judgments and impulse control continue maturing during adolescence and early adulthood. It never stops. Second, it impacts education. Students are not gaining knowledge, but also developing skills like organization, planning, and self-discipline. Learning how the brain works can help create better support systems for students. The Harvard Center on Developing Child emphasizes that learning and repeating practice can help brain continue over time. Third, the brain development connects to mental health. Teenage years and early childhood can develop significant emotional changes and stress. Recognizing how the brain processes emotions and how we can help people develop healthier coping strategies and seek support when needed. The stage in life is important for emotional growth and mental health support. Finally, understanding brain development encourages personal growth. Even after reaching adulthood, people continue learning, changing, and improving. The brain's ability to adapt means the growth does not have an expiration date. Today we looked at 3 important ideas about the brain development. First, we discussed how the brain works, including the role of the 4 lobes and the importance of the frontal lobe in decision-making, impulse control, planning, and emotional regulation. Second, we explored where the idea the brain develops at 25 came from and how MRI studies contributed to that belief. And finally, we examined what current research says that age 25 is not an exact finish line, and that the brain development is a lifelong process and different for everyone. Although many people believe the brain is fully developed at the age of 25, the truth is that the brain is much more complex. Development does not happen at the same speed for everyone, and our brains continue adapting throughout our lives. So the next time you hear someone say your brain is fully developed at 25, remember, while 25 can be an important milestone, it isn't the exact finish line. Our brains continue to learn, adapt, and grow from every experience that we have. And maybe that's the most exciting part. And no matter our age, we all are capable to be able to keep learning, changing, and becoming better versions of ourselves. Thank you. This is Angel Hicks signing off.